panel of my esteemed colleagues. I brought them here together because they contributed as members to an earlier conference. It was the NAIRR National AI Research Resource Pilot first annual meeting, inaugural meeting. So we got Urban Wiggins, Kenneth Gaucher, and Peter Angelos from, well, you can read University of Maryland Eastern Shore, Morehouse, and Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. Also, there's a QR code. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what the NAIRR is, and there's some links in there, so if you want to go ahead and get access to the slides, you can do that now, or even on the next slide, which I can press this button. So again, my esteemed panelists, there's a picture of us all at the NAIRR Pilot meeting. I am Dana Brunson. I work at Internet 2 in the Research Engagement Program. I was part of the program committee for this as well, so that's how we all got to hang out. Of course, I also met some of these folks way back in 2017?
Yeah,
at either South Carolina State or the meeting in Atlanta.
The meeting in Atlanta.
The meeting in Atlanta when the MSCC charter was first constructed. So it was great. Okay, so we'll just move right along because I want to give them a chance to talk. Okay, look at this. So what is the NAIRR Pilot? National AI Research Resource. So this was started as part of a national initiative. It's multi-agency, so across a lot of federal agencies. It's a public-private partnership, which is somewhat unusual in this space. And the key to remember is a pilot. As you heard earlier, this is one of those cases where you're flying the plane while you're building it. I want to read this one sentence. The aim is to ensure that AI resources and tools are equitably accessible to the broad research and education communities in a manner that advances trustworthy AI and protects privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. And I checked just now, and that is still on the website. And I think this is a pilot, and what I feel strongly about, and I think we all do in this room, is that we hold the NAIRR Pilot to that aim. And so all of us here on the program committee that are involved would want to hear if there's feedback that they're not doing that. So what this is, what it really is for you as faculty, research, and classroom use, it's the way to get resources. So everything from Google, AWS, Anthropic, OpenAI, along with federally funded resources that you'll find at the academic supercomputing centers. It's just the things, right? A little bit of service. It doesn't fund your research or stuff, but it's any application domain. The NSF is running the pilot, but it's not limited to STEM, since that's been a popular topic here. And you can learn more here. And the other place you can learn more is this. So another grant my team and I have is about helping people write allocation requests. So to get these, you don't pay them money, but you do have to submit a proposal that says what you're going to try to do, and then they review that, and then they give you the keys to the kingdom. And so if you're interested in this, there's a YouTube video right now on how to do proposal guidance. But my team and I would be super interested in talking to any of you or your colleagues about how we can help support you using these freely available resources. And with that, one more piece. So the NAIRR Pilot's one thing out there, but there are other national resources that are available at no charge. There's the NSF has this access program, and there's some easy buttons here. So not just like high performance computing type resources, but there's one of my favorites called Jetstream that it acts very much like cloud resources, and you press a button and then you get a virtual machine. They can set it up for your classroom use. They're super helpful. So many good testimonials about leveraging those resources. There's my team, the research engagement team. You can email us, and one of our jobs is to keep track of all these things in the ecosystem. If you tell us what you're trying to do, we can help find somebody that can help you do it. And then a campus research computing consortium, which is a community of practice, a little bit like MSCC, that covers a lot of workforce development and other resources, and has various collaborations with MSCC. one way or another. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter.
Hello and welcome, everybody. I just wanted to say a couple words. My name is Peter Angelos. I'm at Fond du Lac Tribal Community College. I'm currently the Executive Information Officer. That's the role of CIO on the campus. And just so we can all relate to one another, I have one IT employee and myself. We have about 900 students, maybe 1,700 if you count our PSEO and college and the schools and everybody. So I'm accustomed to the realities of an under-resourced environment and the challenges that makes real to most of our lives. And so that's going to be part of my perspective a little bit in talking about AI and research, teaching in the classroom, and how do you get access to something like the NAIRR Pilot program. On the slide, you have the usual things. We're a union of cultures. We're the only tribal college out of the 35 that's also part of a state public system. This was on purpose, and it hurts us all the time in every way on purpose. We're never going to be public enough. We're never going to be Indian enough. But it's this place where you're not in one frame or the other. You're not colonial frame. You're not indigenous tribal frame. It's the reality of the lives of our faculty, staff, students, and communities that there isn't this clean line, that we have to really acknowledge the presence and existence of all of us together. And this is a lot of a callback to what Karen Colbert was saying about who determines what is going to constitute the language model, the algorithm, how do we get voice, how do we get agency, and how do we inject ourselves into this world. And so if we just want to go on to the next slide. So one thing that we can do is, everybody here, who is actually not at an institution or personally engaged in the NAIRR Pilot? Raise your hands. Okay, so anyone who is not currently working on the NAIRR Pilot, you're in the right place. Because what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to talk about for a few minutes here, is why it's so important to have access to these resources in a way that is funded and in a way that you can assert your data sovereignty, your data governance, and your research interests, the interests of educating your students to be competent and confident using AI. This is your access point to get funding, and it's a broad and dynamic range of research disciplines and AI initiatives. So I invite you to dig in and dive deep. And through the last year, the NAIRR Pilot has created a lot faster tracks for you to be able to get up and going and running once you are engaged in a NAIRR Pilot. So one of the challenges is I don't have a NAIRR Pilot on my campus, and I'm very engaged in NAIRR. So what's going on with that? Well, that's kind of part of the reality. We have a lot of campus activities and research and data sovereignty, ethics, and discussions. So the challenge is, how do you actually make it happen and connect the dots in a resource-scarce campus environment where everyone's working many jobs, has a lot of hats on? One thing you can do is engage and survey and just step back and say, what are the current projects that are going on that would be good for a NAIRR Pilot? So we have eDNA, we're working on a NASA SNOX satellite project. We're doing RNA sequencing. These are all things that are really important to us in terms of our nation of the Fond du Lac people, because we're looking at genetic infiltration in native species like wild rice, and we're looking at invasive aquatics and how we're going to be able to maintain our obligation to preserve these important parts of our culture, our land, our language, our people. So I think my one point here is we're at this kind of tension point, this intersection where if you don't participate, is this just going to be another data and digital divide where historically underrepresented, under-resourced institutions are left out? And if we are going to engage, how do we do it in a way that can help assert our data sovereignty and our interests and our governance? All of the resources in NAIRR are there. You'll be funded, so you're not going to be the product. You're going to be using the product. And you can negotiate and pick what resources make sense to your campus data governance and your personal research goals or teaching and learning goals. And one thing that I'm thinking is going to be a very successful strategy for us is running private language learning models and then opening them in a curated way so that they can be used and shared as foundation models and shared outcomes and products, but in a way that is in acknowledgement of this tension between our culture, language, and land sovereignty and the value that we can contribute to providing competency for our students and advancing research in sponsored grant.
Thank you.
How you doing? Kenneth Gaucher, just finished up year 14 at Morehouse. So I'm the Chenault Endowed Professor of Computer Science, chair of the department starting this January. It's been a rough semester, wild semester. But I also had a previous role as a division chair at the college where I created Morehouse Online and Coursera at Morehouse. Also run a research center that's pretty active on the campus as well. Next slide. Just a little bit about Morehouse. I'm sure everybody in this room knows a little bit, but one big thing I think a lot of people don't realize that we're a liberal arts institution, and that dictates a lot of things that happen. And I would venture to say, as a faculty member, we're more liberal arts than HBCUs sometimes, which is interesting. But we can go to the next slide. Or is that it? It's only two? As far as things that we've done in the AI space, we're maybe not as active as some other institutions. I'm part of we have a Gen AI work group like Peter talked about. I'm a part of that. We have some courses that we've taught. We have had some corporate support in terms of some AI initiatives. And I think the big thing for us is we were written into the proposal for the new LCCF that got funded last year with University of UT Austin. So that's the big, huge thing on the Morehouse side. So look forward to talking more about what we're doing and how Morehouse is partnering with the NAIRR Pilot.
Okay, good morning. My name is Urban Wiggins. I am the Vice Provost for the Office of Decision Science and Visualization at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. Fancy title for the office. Inside that office houses institutional research. I'm also an assistant professor in the computer science department. And for our aspect of input regarding AI, it initially began with a simple conversation when I was discussing NAIRR with our CIO. And his first response was, they are providing all of these resources for free? I said, yes. Does our faculty know? I said, some do, some don't. We don't have any rules governing what they can do. Do they know what they can? And I said, no. Do we have any policies? I said, no, I don't think we have. Who's going to create the policies? And I said, Mr. CIO. And then he looked at me and he said, oh yeah, don't forget, your title is also Chief Data Officer. And I said, okay, so we might want to address it from a different perspective. So while we talk about NAIRR and the resources that are available to them, we had a pre-NAIRR introduction onto your campus conversation. And the nature of that was, I'm trying to squint to see what I wrote. Oh, yeah. So comment he said was, that we've heard on the campus was, everybody's already using AI. Another faculty comment was that, what's wrong with using AI? And that lies part of our problem, because you're looking at that problem from multiple perspectives. Those questions can be stated by both student population and faculty and staff and administrators. So it's multifaceted in that students comment about everybody's using it and what's wrong with it is from a perspective of them actually trying to get away doing less work. The faculty aspect of those questions is looking at the students trying to find a way to do less work. The input from the staff came differently because I said, here's the problem. In utilizing some of the resources that are available and some of the ones that they are aware of, you have to deal with a couple of minor legal ramifications, like FERPA, HIPAA. Those minor things discuss where you can have your data. So if the data leaves your campus, where does it go? Oh, well, they're going to process it, and they're going to do all these analytical things, and they're going to visualize it, and it's going to be all nice and pretty, and you've given your data to an outside entity that may or may not have the requirements to properly secure that information. And so as our conversation grew, we started addressing a couple of, I forgot my contacts. So we started addressing a couple of other issues. So we came up with, since we didn't want to be heavy-handed, rules, because it sounds formal, but informally, very strong suggestions. Very strong suggestions. And one is determine your policies prior to implementation. So we started to ask the question to tell staff, if you're going to be utilizing some of these tools to analyze student performance, you cannot share PII, personally identifiable information. And when you say that, oh, that's that, okay, you have their name, their date of birth, their gender, we already have a problem in one line. And you do this for your students. So we do it with the staff, and they're utilizing these tools. And then we have to establish the data governance policy, where you start talking about how much data is being utilized, how much data is being placed in other systems, what's the level of data, who has certain levels of access of the data. Because one of the questions that's generally asked is, between finance and the enrollment management and the overall administration, the administrative president, is, okay, it's May right now. How many students can we anticipate for fall of 2025? I'm from Louisiana. I don't have any chicken bones in my drawer, so I can't readily answer that question specifically. But that is a question that is being asked. How many students will we have in the dormitories so they can prepare? How many students will be on the food plan so they can, just take all the data and give it to them, and they're going to analyze it, and you get this pretty visualization. but then you discuss what data you're providing, how detailed is that data, and how much PII is in that data. Because we can, yes, violate FERPA, and in some cases, because some students have physical or mental, they have medical restrictions, you violated HIPAA. So when we start talking about, well, who should see this information? Okay, now that's where data governance came in, and what's the policy for data governance? Okay, we're gonna work on that too. And then you have to deal with the data security. And that is how you're accessing it and how much information you're providing. So we had this discussion in earnest before we started the engagement with our faculty and staff to have input upon what the students would be doing. Because at the end of the day, all of this information has to be addressed. You cannot it's not in your best interest to simply operate in the world of, what do you say, called hope, where you're just hoping it's gonna work out and no one's gonna do anything accidentally incorrect. Next one. Okay, so we talk about specific areas of consideration. So we just spelled out data, PII information shouldn't be there. You want to make sure that the campus looks at the software, understands what the software is doing, who has access, who can pull it. Third-party software becomes a bit problematic if it's shared without restrictions. If you use AI on a remote site, who has access to it at those sites? How do they dispose of the data? One of the previous occurrences when we started migrating data to the cloud, they would the previous cloud system vendors and the remote system environments, they would upgrade the devices that you would utilize. In the process of upgrading, they put a new one in. What happened to they copied your data over and it's seamless to you, but what happens to that server that they had all your data on it? Did they wipe it? Did they destroy the drive? What is their process? So you have to look at the entire spectrum of what happens in that complete life cycle of your data, because at the end of the day, you're responsible for your data. We also go into talk about utilization of the P card, we call it a P card. I think at other schools I've heard it called a P card, but it's the credit card that you use. That credit card information, you guys are big, brilliant CIOs and researchers with all this wonderful grant money. Ooh, you have an unlimited budget. Somebody can go swiping for a long time before the credit card agency sees it. And then, I don't know about you, but sometimes I don't get my credit card statement until it's been processed through a couple of offices. So by the time I see it, it might be a month and a half later and all the damage has been done, and oops, that's a very expensive oops. So when we start talking about utilization of these tools, we're not only talking about ChatGPT. These tools are provided for us to do other things, and in my area, one of the things is enrollment projections, and that's what we're utilizing. And researchers, you utilizing this for your research. And in certain environments, you know what? Dr. Gaucher over there is doing some great research. I wouldn't mind getting a glimpse of his data and his results, and maybe I can get it out, publish it before him. He was just doing the heavy lifting. I appreciate it. I'm not sure he's gonna appreciate me publishing it without his name, but things happen. Well, we don't want things to happen. So we start talking about what should you do, what should you consider prior to the implementation of AI. We know we're gonna deal with it. We know the reality of it. We're just saying, hey, we know our kid's gonna eventually probably drive. That's why you give them driving classes. That's why you have a book to read. You're not saying no. We're saying we want to do it and put a couple of guardrails in place to tailor or temper our environment and make some individuals understand there are ramifications. Your student ID number is not PII. But if you put his name, his date of birth. You put down his, oh, we didn't have his social security number. Name, date of birth, gender. That's a good bit. Address. That's a good bit of information that you do not want disclosed. And you start talking about issues regarding how many times, who has, like myself, with the contacts, I'm one of the ADA students. Well, maybe I can share that. So when you see me squinting in a meeting, yeah, that's me. But some other information may not be shared. So you have to look at it not simply from ChatGPT only. There are other aspects, and they are great tools. And with NAIRR, you have these great resources that allow you to do things that are introductory to some and just a windfall for others, because it's, I don't want to say free in a simple free, but in a sense of it's being provided as a wonderful resource that we could utilize, take advantage of. But we want to kind of don't forget that we have a responsibility. And I'll close at that and pass back the laptop. So,
Oh, you can keep it.
yeah, I might need to see something else.
Thank you, Urban. Okay, so, yeah, so just real quick, totally agree with Urban. If you want to use the NAIRR Pilot resources, yay, but don't put any of that kind of data on there. There is a thing called NAIRR Secure. It is still, I think, very, very early pilot, so stay tuned for that sort of thing. We do have questions that we formulated that the panelists seemed inclined to want to answer, but I encourage you to come and ask questions that they may not want to answer. I'm kidding. So we will start on these, but if anything pops into your head and you want to ask it, come on up to one of the two microphones and I will gladly give you the floor. So we'll start with the first one. Please share any personal or institutional engagement with NAIRR Pilot program and research computing so far. You may have covered a little bit of that, but.
Yeah, so I was a participant in the planning and program committee for the our first annual. I come to this from a couple perspectives, right? I'm on the board of the MSCC, and I really understand that unlike, there's always been these transformations in technology that are challenging in higher ed, like, personal calculator, spell check, Google. This is transformationally different, I think. And this is an opportunity that we can't just miss, or we're just going to promulgate, we're going to continue being on the other side of the resource world. We're going to, I really think it's so significantly important for me to participate in the context of minority serving institutions and creating equitable cyber infrastructure. And there are very good ways that you can approach this holistically and bring along the values and concerns of your institution. But after all, some of the challenges and criticisms of using AI in research, we're just going to ask the same questions we've always asked. Is the scientific outcome predictable? Is it repeatable? If colleagues and peers review this and run it on a different platform, do they get the same outcomes? If we're teaching in a classroom, maybe we require that you have to use AI to write your paper, and then we apply the source analysis, criticism, and discipline methodology that we'd normally do to see, is that valid? Is it true? Is it good? Is it the best evidence to support your argument? And in that context, in higher ed, we are the experts on that. We should have the confidence and poise to be able to stand squarely and say, this is no more or less a different challenge, because we're prepared with methodology and analysis, criticism, and practices that guarantee that the outcomes are going to satisfy our requirements.
So currently, Morehouse has not optimized its advertising of the NAIRR Pilot. I submitted a one-pager Didn't hear back from NSF, so I was definitely interested in doing something as it relates to NAIRR Pilot or winning an award. I think Morehouse kind of is in a situation, and I don't know if other schools are in the same situation, maybe not, but when I think about NAIRR Pilot, I think about the institutional support, right? You have this resource, which is really, really great in theory, right? But if you don't have the institutional support to take advantage of the resource, it's not going to be as valuable for your institution, right? And I'll break it down into two categories, research and teaching, right? As a researcher, as many of you all know, there's not a lot of areas of research that doesn't require major instrumentation, right? Major spaces, major equipment. And that's really risky because you can go spend $1 million on equipment and that professor that wanted it leaves the next year, right? They also need special space. They need equipment, and there's safety hazards and things like that. There's a lot that goes into scientific equipment when it comes to research. But with this NAIRR Pilot and not having to have any space on your campus dedicated, that's a game changer, and I think it's a great equalizer for a lot of smaller institutions, right, that are under-resourced. And so, but at the same time, if there's not any faculty support for this type of research, right, to kind of nudge faculty towards integrating AI and using AI into more of their research endeavors, it's not going to be, that demand is not going to be there to use it, if that makes sense. So things like startup funding, right? If someone has an idea they want to work on that's AI related, having that funding to help them get their ideas off the ground, right? And maybe they can go for some bigger grants later, but you got to start somewhere. So if they're not native AI researchers, they're not going to try it without having that kind of investment from the college, right? And so that $10,000, $15,000 startup grant will go a long way, right? If people can take advantage and tilt their research to this vein going forward. From the teaching side, right? Everybody I think, at Morehouse at least, there's people that's interested. There's some people that are like, we hate AI, we don't want to touch it, never even mention it at a liberal arts school. And there's other people like, well, why aren't we teaching classes with it, right? We haven't had any directive from the senior leadership that we need to be teaching so much in AI. As chair, it's just kind of been, well, these opportunities have kind of come from external partners, and we try to take advantage of it. We know our students are interested, our CS majors, but I think you talk about AI, it's more of an institutional thing versus a departmental thing, right? And so I think institutions need to be really clear in terms of senior leadership. What do we want to offer in terms of teaching and it relates to AI across the college, right? Your computing departments are going to be involved, your IT departments are going to be involved for sure, but there needs to be some institutional leadership around AI instruction. What do you want to do, what do you not want to do? Because that goes into things like faculty hiring, that goes into things like faculty development, right? Morehouse has been great at having these ad hoc workshops, but it's only so much you can do with an ad hoc workshop, right? I think you really have to come up with a strategic plan of who are these workshops going to prepare, what are they going to do with these workshops, right? Is it, it seems like this is too big to kind of just ad hoc do things. There needs to be strategic outcomes, right? And then you have interventions to help you get to those outcomes. But without naming those outcomes, you're just kind of throwing darts and you're not using your resources optimally, right? But I think, like I said, to highlight strategic plan for AI, your planning resources / faculty development, and then even faculty lines. Because if there's certain classes you want to teach, what class are you not going to teach to free up that faculty to teach these AI courses, right? Something to think about.
For my institution, what came about was I went to NAIRR, worked with the development of the meeting, and came back and was discussing it. And they said, well, introduce it to the faculty senate or the assembly, I can't remember which one, upon introducing it, it was a wow factor. Ooh, that sounds great. And then it was a silence. Because I started asking questions because, when I had a question. And then finally someone said, I don't know much about AI to utilize these tools. I know my research, but I don't know enough about AI to know what kind of tool I might be able to utilize. So that redirected the nature of our conversation at my institution. Now, admittedly, this meeting didn't take place until April, which was the second to the last meeting before the end of the semester. But it allowed me to tell individuals, hey, let's have some private one-on-one conversations so we could talk about what your area is and what NAIRR offers and help you bridge that gap, because I know sometimes you see all these great resources and they're great. Everybody said that they're great. I don't know what to do with this. What does AWS do for me? I don't, and it's that because they don't know what AWS is. I heard it's Amazon. Okay, and then what? So it stops that, and that fear of not wanting to be embarrassed and say that you don't know something, and that trepidation leads to individuals being cut off. So what we decided was we was talking to individuals privately, having meetings informally to have that discussion. And with that being said, yes, with NAIRR is available where you can contact them and ask questions. And I don't know what I can do, but I might need a resource. I don't know which one I might want to use, but that might be an approach for you if you're not intimately familiar with the space. So that's what we ended up doing. I haven't made a lot of progress yet, but again, I had one discussion, and it was the second to the last meeting before the end of the semester. But I have had people contact me saying, hey, I'd like to do something in AI. I have no idea what I can do, but it sounds good. And I say, hey, if it sounds good to you, that's a spark. Let's see if we can fan that spark and and create a flame.
Thank you, Urban. Oh, good. You go for it.
May I interrupt the questions?
Please.
Okay. So it sounds like this is a great opportunity to have standardized configurations from campus to campus for potential collaborations, right? Through through whether it be TCUs or HBCUs. Are you finding that this is encouraging not just cross interdisciplinary collaboration, but also cross institutional collaboration?
Yeah, so probably the most likely and probable use of AI in research on my campus is going to be investigating the hybridization of native indigenous species of aquatic wildlife with invasive species. And first of all, to effectively do that, you'd want to have a trained foundation learning model that could, once you've DNA sequenced and differentiated, be able to work on finding to what extent the genomes have been hybridized. There's a cultural reason why this is significant for indigenous people, because we have a responsibility and stewardship for not only our land and our people, our culture, but also all of the animals that live in our community and our world. This is something that could be shared across all of the indigenous nations as a common concern, or as something, so very much so in answer to your question, it would take one institution to try to pilot this and then work within the other 35 tribal colleges to work on this as some type of cross institutional or interinstitutional project. So I think the answer is solidly yes. We just need some way in which to facilitate institutions going ahead and being able to get started on this. And I think NAIRR provides opportunities for that.
I know we haven't, I think at scale, leveraged NAIRR for the institutional collaborations, but I think that's an excellent point. So I have a lot of institutions, especially from R1 institutions, that come to me and want to collaborate on research projects. They want the HBCU brownie points when it comes to time for their proposal reviewed. So I think having a resource like this where you know your MSI partner has the resources to do some of this AI work, right, helps to have those institutions actually be partners, real partners, genuine partners in those relationships instead of
The checkbox.
a checkbox that you use and you throw them a couple thousand and tell them to be happy with it, right? Ideally, you can build capacity with those partnerships. And I think this can help a lot with that.
My only comment is it gives you an opportunity. I agree. I think it's a wonderful concept to be able to utilize it, and it levels the playing field. It allows you to use the same resources to do joint research. And you don't have to worry about one institution having facilities and the other one doesn't because of blah, 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 blah. No, this levels the playing field. So now we can be on the same level having similar conversations. And that's humongous.
Thank you. One, I apologize for pasting 3 the same as 2, so we'll skip that. And since we are near the end of time, I want to pose maybe a slightly different question because you guys have hit on a lot of this. What would you suggest either the NAIRR Pilot or us as a community do to help facilitate the people on your campuses to leverage national resources? Like, you know, my favorite answer would be human facilitators that help them, but you can.
When on National Science Foundation for MSIs, for HBCUs, and for TCUs have had a model for providing facilitation and grant writing. I think if we could have a couple of exemplars, a couple of case study type of, this is a successful application, this is a proposal that has all of the things that you want to have in your proposal, and then have a quick track, and I know we're working on having much more of a quick track, so that if somebody has a shovel-ready project, that's much different than when somebody's doing a total from-scratch exploratory and discovery type of project. So there should also be a way that you can quickly assess the projects, chunk them out into what level of facilitation support they need, fast-track the ones that are ready to run, and then maybe help to cultivate the ones that are just starting from scratch.
Do I have your permission to be a little spicy this morning, this afternoon?
Any permission to be spicy on the stage?
All right. Uh-oh. People love free shit, right? And I think what happens is that when people see something free, there's this genuine interest and intrigue and aura around it, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't have a plan what to do with that free shit, you're not going to get much out of it, right? So I think in terms of taking advantage of this, I think it really comes to thinking about how does your institution want to leverage advanced computing resources, having a plan how to use those NAIRR resources before actually using the resources. Because I think there's a lot of components that come with these resources, and a lot of our institutions, especially I know Morehouse in particular, don't have the infrastructure to really take advantage of a NAIRR like it should be. Where do you really want to go as an institution? You know, how important is the research? How important is the teaching? How do you want? I think there's a lot of internal questions. I think senior leadership should be involved, CIOs, academics. Almost up to the president level, right? What do you really want to do, and then how can the NAIRR Pilot and NAIRR resources support the plan that you actually have set as an institution?
I'm gonna be the boring one today then. From my standpoint, one of the things I think is a combination of what they said, but I think what we have is that on-ramping to that AI highway, that is the concern. You have some institutions who are better positioned to be involved with AI, so that on-ramp does not need to be that long. But then you have other institutions who are low resource and have a computer science department, for example, of 3 people. That's gonna make it, and those 3 people may be experts in their field, and AI is not it. And now that on-ramp is much longer. And to have an ambassador on the campus, it becomes difficult because you have the fear of, oh my goodness, it's AI. I need to be a computer scientist to be able to discuss it. And you have all these built up trepidations regarding this stuff that doesn't necessarily apply. So you have someone who is in art who would like to do something in AI, but no, I have to be a computer scientist. And then you have an institution that doesn't have the supporting mechanisms in place because maybe low resource, or maybe you don't have the right individuals. So that on-ramping of both the institution itself and the faculty and staff, it becomes a bit more difficult. So from my standpoint, having ambassadors that transcend an institution. So if I had someone that was an expert in AI that understood how AI could be integrated with individuals who are in chemistry and biology, that I could go and touch and have them, they can speak to chemists better than I can. Just like I can speak to a computer scientist, and we have our own little jargon, so if all of a sudden I start talking about Dragon Ball Z or I start talking about anime, and we don't lose a step. However, when I do that in a different environment, or better yet, in my case, one time when I spoke to my president, and I told her, ma'am, I have to deal with Pookie and Nuck Nuck them. And she looked at me and she was like, okay. But that's the reality for those conversations. And having an AI with all these tools, having someone be able to help me, assist me in bringing in faculty who could understand what they're saying, help them relate with those subject matters, would assist me to be a better evangelist, not simply I don't want to say simple, because ambassador and evangelist, they have different motivations. But I would need that evangelist. I need that other person in that other space, so that if I do go to another institution and help that institution, that on-ramp can be more accessible to multiple individuals. AI is not limited to the computer science department or the engineering department. It is not an IT thing. It's wide open, and the moment we keep trying to put it in this nice little, cute little box that, only Dr. Gaucher's shop deal with AI, that's when you start having bigger problems, because you have limited yourself, you've limited your students, your faculty, you have limited the perspective from your institution, in my humble opinion. Okay.
These are great answers. Okay,
Real quick,
last question.
Okay, so there's a lot of talk about resources. So my question is, what is the impact of the pipes that are coming to these institutions? I'm speaking capacity, in terms of being able to participate and collaborate, because various institutions have various capacities in terms of high performance networks. So how does that relate to the ability to collaborate?
Can y'all make that fast?
That's a bit outside the scope of the NAIRR, because some of the NAIRR resources are local. Software is within that device. So collaboration, that's a different conversation. CI infrastructure is part of that solution, and there are things that we're putting in place. Part of MSCC is to build out that almost ubiquitous environment across across multiple institutions, so that you can have that type of collaboration. But that's a little bit outside the scope. So in respect of time and everyone else's food, if you're like me, your stomach growling a little bit, can we have that conversation offline? And anybody else who would like to be involved, feel free, but that's infrastructure, and NAIRR has an impact upon it, but not per se regarding this conversation.
And then
Respectfully.
just one little final call out there. In a previous session today, Bharat Walwal is an expert on creating a way in which you can keep all of your data local and yet leverage significant AI resources without having to do the transport. So we can talk about that
Yeah.
off band.
So yes, so if you have more questions or discussion or ideas around the NAIRR pilot, me or my colleagues are happy to talk with you. But in the meantime, and before lunch, please help me thank the panelists.